Hi, this is the Dr. Deborah Show. This is a show where we talk about bringing peace and calm into your life. And later in the show, we'll be talking about mental health stigma. We're live at KCSB FM Santa Barbara 91.9. This is a pre-recorded show. KCSB is a platform for cultural expression and thoughtful discussion, providing a diverse educational forum. I'm a Santa Barbara-based clinical psychologist, and I specialize in pediatric neuropsychology. And during my clinical training and my current work, I've treated thousands of people, and I want to share my experiences with you. I'm also a UCSB alumni, and I live locally in Santa Barbara. And this show's all about our community and how to create compassionate conversations about our well-being and health. Today on the show, we're talking about mental health and well-being with a focus on diversity and inclusion in the media with our very special guest, Sandra Manley. She's an author, ardent philanthropist, socialpreneur, and waymaker. Sandra grew up in California and she resides in Washington, D.C., and she's a sought-after speaker in the areas of diversity and inclusion, corporate responsibility, ethics, and images in the media. As a fervent philanthropist, Manley has lived her life purposefully with open eyes and an open heart, ready and willing to make a difference in the lives of others. Her passion for making a positive and real impact on behalf of otherwise under-recognized projects and causes by channeling her efforts and resources has been both inspiring and lasting. Whatever it is, she finds a way and she makes it happen. She especially has a strong commitment to working with and encouraging young people to thrive and excel, getting them excited about education, especially science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, while also bringing attention to the impact of serious community issues like gang violence. Sandra also shares an equal and enduring passion for the arts by giving opportunity to talented up-and-comers, celebrating the unsung heroes and she-roes of music and film, and keeping art appreciation alive and thriving in our schools. Ms. Manley has been nationally recognized by numerous organizations for her boundless commitment and positive impact on education, the arts, community building, and the advancement of diversity in the corporate world and in film. Her efforts and influence in these areas have been a continued focus throughout her professional career and also her entrepreneurial cause-related and philanthropic endeavors. Most recently, Sandra was selected by the University of Southern California Alumni Association as one of a small group of 2019 86th Annual USC Alumni Awards honorees. Past recipients of this prestigious award, which recognizes the professional achievements and outstanding university and community service displayed by a select group of noteworthy Trojans, includes Apollo 11 astronaut Neil Armstrong, world-renowned architect Frank Gehry, opera great Marilyn Horne, and Academy Award-winning filmmakers Robert Zemeckis and Ryan Coogler. Nice. And now a first-time author, Sandra has taken the storytelling she has often shared with others about how she was raised by her mother's favorite words using the letter L, and she's turned it into a new fabulous nonfiction book for parents, educators, and others called Raised Up by Ms. Manley and Her L's. This recounts the daily lessons that have helped shape how she lives today, and they were inspired by her mother's teachings. So she herself has adopted her own single-word lessons using her favorite letter C: character, compassion, conviction, care, commitment, certain, complete, and cherish. Welcome to the show, Sandra Manley.
Wow, well, thank you so much, and thank you for what you do in helping to bring about wellness and harmony in others' lives. It's an honor to be with you today.
Thank you. I feel the same way. I feel very honored to have you on the show, and I'm really excited to hear your words of wisdom. So what's up next is I'm just going to talk briefly about mental health stigma, and then we're going to talk about mental health and well-being and diversity and inclusion in the media. And then we'll talk a little bit about prevention awareness through diversity and inclusion in the media. And why am I talking about all this today? I always just like to remind people we're talking about mental health stigma today because in recent news, did you know that mental health is the largest public health priority? And it's also the largest financial burden of any health issue in the world. That's according to the World Health Organization and World Economic Forum. There's a beautiful report the Centers for Disease Control wrote called Attitudes Toward Mental Illness, and they found that stigma and embarrassment are two of the top reasons why people with mental health issues do not seek help or medication. I also just like to reinforce the idea that issues surrounding mental health affect people from all walks of life. None of us are immune to that. We all have things that happen in our lives. And just describe briefly what is mental health. From my perspective, I think of mental health as a physiological balance, meaning our heartbeat, our brain, our nervous system, our thoughts are kind of at a balanced rate and balanced level, and that gives us a sense of inner peace. I was wondering, Sandra, how would you describe mental health?
I think mental health is about that state of harmony, that state of being able to reflect on just how you feel and just how you're able to express yourself. So for me, it's really about the harmony in one's life and how they're feeling and if they're able to express that.
Nice. So basically you're saying you think like if the person has the ability to be able, if they have feelings within them or thoughts or emotions, that they have a place and space that they're able to express that? And that gives them a sense of...
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. That's so true. I think we all have just a different description of mental health, but I think it sounds like when everything's sinking. And as we're here exploring the relationship between mental health and diversity and inclusion in the media, which I think is such an important topic, I noticed as I did a little bit of research, it seems that in general, most employees at companies don't even go near topics publicly about mental health because revealing their own challenges may cause them to be discriminated against. And I think that that's why this is so important to talk about stigma and bias and discrimination or fear, so that we can shift our maybe approach to the media. I think that the media has really focused on a lot of learning disabilities and maybe not focused on all of the different real experiences people have and also relevant research. So it can be confusing for people to understand, what really is going on for people. I'm just going to talk briefly just about mental health stigma. I like to just give a brief explanation or definition just so people who are listening have an understanding. I know it's kind of a funny word. And then we're going to hear more from Sandra Evers, mainly about mental health and well-being and diversity and inclusion in the media. And I think there's the social stigma and self-stigma is kind of what I've broken it down to. A social stigma is when attitudes and discriminating behavior are directed towards individuals with mental health issues as a result of a label they may have been given. And a self-stigma, which is very common, is when the person who has the mental health issue internalizes their perception of discrimination. This is very common, where someone might have a perception of someone who seems different, and then they themselves feel different and start discriminating against themselves. And I think that really can lead to feelings of shame and to poor treatment outcomes. So these stigmatizing attitudes toward people are widespread and commonly held. And so we need to take better care of our mental health by being able to discuss our emotions, thoughts, and feelings within ourselves. I was wondering, Sandra, how do you think that mental health and diversity and inclusion in the media intersect?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things, when we talk about finding one's voice, being able to articulate how one feels, what they see of themselves, but also from that external standpoint, when we talk about diversity, when people see themselves, that's about valuing diversity. And sometimes, unfortunately, in the media, we have not seen the full portrayal or images of all people, and we certainly don't see the dimensions of all dimensions. And for me, that can impact a person's mental well-being, of feeling accepted, feeling that they belong, and feeling included. So I think it really, the dialogue around diversity in the media, it's really about how individuals are being portrayed or not being portrayed. And I definitely think that has an impact on one's mental being.
For sure.
If they're feeling that they're being accepted or included. And I can remember as a young girl asking my mother, why isn't it that there are people portrayed like me and you on TV? And, she said in her small voice, change it. But it really was about people feeling being invisible. I think still today, when it comes to people with disabilities, we still don't see a very wide range of individuals of all abilities are being portrayed in the media.
I agree completely. I was actually just thinking of that, how I remember when I was, an undergrad at UCSB, it was like I took this racial inequality class. And I mean, that was, 15, at least that was like 20 years ago. But the thing is they were talking about how, a lot of fairy tales and different TV shows, they depict or show a person who has maybe a disability as somebody who's like kind of demonized, that's discriminated against versus just embracing what that person's disability is. And so I think it's very ingrained in our culture with the media. And I love what you said, too, because I think from the time we're children, we really do notice differences in others. And then we're taught, to look at the world through this lens of our upbringing and the life experiences that shape us. And there's a lot of lack of understanding about behaviors or an appearance of a communication that then gets labeled. So that's why it's so important for us to be out talking about this. I noticed that when I did a little bit of research, they're talking about constant exposure to, audio and visual stimulation that Americans, and I'm sure most of us, are experiencing. That's really changing the way we develop. And then also the way we have complex conversations about the way we feel. I was curious, and actually this person is talking about how the importance of parents teaching young children to understand their emotions. Because, if we watch a show, it's not going to be an accurate portrayal. And then the child, if the parent's not there, they're not learning that. So anyhow, that was just a little bit of research I found. I was wondering Sandra, why do you think taking care of our mental health is so essential?
Well, I think it allows us to really exist. It allows us to be able to accomplish those things that we want to accomplish from a day-to-day standpoint. It impacts how we interact with others.
I can barely hear you. Okay, there we go. Yeah. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's fair. Thanks.
Yeah, I said it impacts how we exist from a day-to-day standpoint, how we exist in the classroom, how we exist in our workspaces, just how we exist in life. So it's so important that we look at the importance of wellness and what are those things that make us well, but also what are those things that impact our environment so we're in that right environment. I think that's why having what I like to call safe conversations, our courageous conversations are real important of really understanding how an individual is feeling from day to day. And if they're not...
Yeah. It's okay. I'm listening. If they're not, sorry.
And if they're not, the question is, what do we do about that? And sometimes I will just say, I'm going to go back to the images. Sometimes I just met with a young person. And if that person is not seeing he or herself reflected in a meeting or reflected if a young child is looking at a coloring book or, TV programs, that definitely can impact that person overall from an environmental standpoint of how they're feeling, if they feel a sense of belonging.
For sure. Well, yeah, I think that we need to feel included. And if we don't feel included, or understood, then that can really also just change our brain chemistry and change the way we relate with the world. You said that you like to encourage courageous conversations. Could you explain a little more about that? Maybe we could all learn from you what that is.
Yeah, that courageous conversations, I could think back to, being in college and feeling that, there was a professor or two that maybe did not include me in the conversation or maybe included me in a very negative way. Mm-hmm. And so being able to go up to a person and really talk about, this is how I'm feeling, or, I've got a disability, and just like you just said, I can't hear you or something like that. But really understanding what's going on with an individual, that all individuals matter, mm-hmm. and basically how they're feeling matters, And if we create those kinds of environments for people that can bring forward when they're not feeling included, or they feel that something has been said that may impact them as an individual.
Yeah, that's a very powerful kind of tool, I think, for people. And like you're saying, it probably was daunting at the moment to think of how to deal with that, even though you clearly knew you were being discriminated against. And I think, when we have those, like you can see, those experiences, they're like life changing. They last for our whole life. And even you've committed your life to helping other people in that way. So you're saying kind of for people to take the next step and to think, okay, I'm going to be courageous and I'm going to have this challenging conversation because I know it will be healthier for me and others. Or what do you tell yourself about kind of getting into that place?
Well, I think first of all, we've got to ask ourselves, is it a safe space?
Mm-hmm.
And, you may not be able to be have a very aggressive conversation. It might have to be one that you may have to give scenarios, or you may have to really gently kind of talk about how you're feeling, and then get up the courage to say, okay, I now want to share more, talk more about how I'm feeling about what's happening in this particular situation. But I do think it's a process, and I think no two situations are alike. But I think we've got to think about how the different environments are impacting us and our individual wellness.
Yeah, I noticed that the research, they're talking about embracing our culture's failures is the best way to address them, and encouraging like students, if they're in a room like that, to seek truth and integrity in their lives. And I guess maybe we have to step back too and just assess, if it's safe, like you're saying. But I think if we can try to live a little more present too, probably the media is a very big distractor too, that allows us to not face maybe sometimes the things we need from ourselves. I was wondering, Sandra, can you explain how diversity and inclusion in the media impacts our communities, and how they relate to mental health? So if a community has diversity and TV show or something's portraying a community as, a certain way it's supposed to be, and certain people are included or discriminated against, or, it's like almost what's not being said or what's being presented, then that can really impact, I guess, that way that community handles those kind of predicaments. Maybe they think that's the best way to deal with it, is what they saw on the new, the media, the show.
Well, and especially then when you get into, let's say, the regular 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock TV hour, you might get a different dose of how that now they portrayed it very different, but you never see the positive side. So for me, that actually did have an impact on me as a young person. That's why I took on sort of some of the activism that I have today, is because I still believe the media has an opportunity to help.
For sure.
In portraying people in a balanced light.
Right.
And not one-dimensional.
Right, I know. No, I think that's a very key piece of what we need to shift to, is we need to, I mean, we're still going to have fantasy. We're still going to have things that are not real. But I think when we have portrayals of things that people perceive as real, and maybe that's not really accurate, that can really change that person's way of relating with people, because their belief or their attitude then gets shifted. I'm always pushing for more like commercials, or I don't know. I feel like we need to have more like movie stars who are on those shows, being reflective of mental health, debriefing people and saying, this was a show and this is what I really experienced in my real life, because then they can demystify that. What do you think of that idea?
Oh, no, I definitely think that's where a number of us who work in the to bring about better portrayals of women, people of color, people with disabilities in the media. I think those are some of the things that we definitely want to see. We want to see the full portrayal of individuals, the full imagery from a diversity standpoint. And if you do, we'll have better outcomes. We'll have better outcomes of how young people feel. If you've got young people who go home every day and they basically get a strong dose of media, chances are that's going to impact how that child views life. If they don't see well-diverse, well-developed characters in everything from commercials to the evening news to our television shows.
Yeah, it's making me think about my childhood because I grew up in a very small town and I'm Jewish, and now it's changed. But growing up there, there wasn't a lot of diversity. It was like there was probably like 2 Latino, 2 Asian, 2 African American, 2 Jewish people. And I remember in high school even someone saying to me, "Wow, you're Jewish? You don't look Jewish." So I mean, there was obviously something that person had in their mind about, even religious pieces too, I think, that were not accurate. So happens still. I was wondering, Sandra, how do you think diversity and inclusion in the media accepts or rejects mental health stigma?
I still think there's a lot more that can be done. I still feel there's more education that must take place. I also think that the media, and it's even myself, this is not something that I will say I'm an expert in. And so I think we've got to reach out and bring others in like yourself who can help in telling the right stories, who can help with the education. And so I think there's still a lot of room for growth in the media around mental health, regarding around wellness, and around diversity. I mean, there's still a lot of portrayals of people. When we look at people with disabilities, we still don't see the full spectrum of disabilities. Individuals with disabilities are individuals, like to say, of all abilities being portrayed in the media.
It's so true.
So I think there's still work to do.
There's a lot of work. Yeah, I think so too. I think we're headed in the right direction, but I'm thinking of this woman who, when I was doing my PhD, she did all her dissertation on Disney fairy tales and princesses and all of that. And actually, she found that there was a lot of shame and projection coming from those onto the kids. And on top of that, if you think of like the Hunchback of Notre Dame, or the different kind of quote unquote villains in the movie who are not villains at all, they might have a deformity or disfigurement or some kind of disability. Where they're portrayed, the child internalizes that, and then they think, oh, that's, that person's different, versus, oh, well, maybe they're actually somebody I'd really like to get to know. So I think it sets the precedent. It sets the tenor for how we want to relate with other people. So it's really important to start young. I do like your book you wrote too. It's very sweet about just kind of some basic principles to live by that maybe we need to put more infuse in our education system, like you're saying.
Well, I think one of the reasons I wrote the book is that, my mom raised her 6 children and she raised 10 foster children. And it was really about the letter L and things around the importance of loving. And one of the things when we talk about mental illness and different things, when I talk to young girls, one of the things I share with them is that love is not supposed to hurt. And so one of the things we see, especially in social media with a lot of bullying and different things like that, or unfortunately we are seeing young girls being victimized. And so I want individuals to know that love is something that should feel special and make you happy, but it's not something that should hurt. And then the whole thing around listening, and sometimes we talk about just listening with our ears, but it's also about listening with your eyes. There's so much going on in our country and in our world today, so much things around homelessness and different things like that. And so sometimes you don't even have to listen with your ears. You can see it through your eyes.
For sure.
But also it's about listening with your heart. How are people around you feeling? Really understanding and that loving, that caring. And so that's what the L's are about, things around listening, loving, and learning.
Awesome.
You and I are having this conversation today, and I've already learned so much about, wellness and mental illness. And it's really about life is a journey of learning. And it's not just in the classroom, but it's in the lives of people that you meet along the way.
For sure.
And so that's what the book is all about.
I love that. That's so true. And we learn from each other, how to kind of collaborate. And I was thinking about your L's, and there were a couple things that came to mind because my grandma, her name was Lillian, and my grandpa's name was Leon, and so they've had the L's. And so when I saw your book and it came with the L's, and she'd always sign her name. She had these big L's, and she'd always sign love, live, laugh, Lillian. That's how she'd sign her name. So I was like, oh my gosh, I meant to meet this person. And I think there's some simple concepts she brought up too, about looking at the person. And this is a big thing for neuroscience, actually. You kind of probably just picked that up because you're tuned in. But, our mirror neurons that we really, really need for development, for connection, for growth, they're very powerful. If we don't look at a person and really engage with them, that's why I wish you were here and I could look at you, because I know you're far away, because Sandra's actually across the coast, but I'm still happy we're on the air together. I think, you really learn a lot about the person and you have a connection and it helps you develop as well. And we've lost some of that because we're not having as much time to look at each other. We've also, we spend more time turning to our devices and our screens. And also, maybe we need to shift our cultural mentality, like you're saying, to think more with our other kind of brains. And it's funny because just yesterday when I was recording another person, the same idea came up, which is we don't just think through one head, so to speak. We kind of have our head part of that we think through, and then we have our heart we think through or feel through, or it's our other brain. And we have our gut brain too. And our heart actually has just as many neurons in it as our brain. And our gut has more. So, there's other ways for us to tap into self-care, self-love, and then give that to other people, because we all don't learn, just through talking. That's why babies are really powerful. And I think if we can learn to listen to each other, that would be really powerful, and not just, I think that the problem is people can't listen to other people sometimes because they have to face themselves, and that can be really devastating for someone. So that's why compassion, is such a healthy piece too.
And I think that's great. I think one of the other L's is lifting. My mom would always say, it's better to lift others up than to tear them down. And I think today, when we take a look at what's happening with young people, it's important for us to talk about how important it is to help and lift others up. Because when we talk about mental illness, you never know what someone else is going through.
Exactly.
And
I agree.
So if we can help lift that person up, we might have to be that spokesperson for what that person is going through. Or we might have to be that person to help that person get across the street or open a door. But that lifting is so important. And sometimes not listening is just saying hello to someone. I try, no matter where I'm at in the world, if I'm on an elevator, you'll know it's me because I'm going to speak to everybody on that elevator.
I do the same
thing.
You
never know what just saying hello will do to lift someone's spirit.
And I do, because I know someone's done that for me, even just a little smile or hello. It can just change your whole day, because like you said, you don't know what's going on in someone's life. And I know my mom taught me the same thing, it's like, to work at uplifting. That was the word. She used uplifting, but it's the same thing, is how can you uplift other people? But I think that's a skill too, is when you're with someone, is to kind of check in with yourself and say, okay, you can even do it before you get together with them. Just say, how do I feel? And then you get together with someone and you feel, okay, that person really lifted me up or supported me. And I think it also opens up just some love and caring for each other, because like you're saying, we don't know what's going on. We all have crises and we all suffer in different ways, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, financial, spiritual. So it's important to just be a little more sensitive. I think we've been taught to not be sensitive too. And just kind of open the conversation up. I was looking up a little bit in the news, just because I know you interface with a lot of companies and corporations and things, it seems like. And so I was looking at how discrimination and also just being more inclusive in the workplace, impacts someone. And the company Bloomberg, the big computer, the guy that does all the financial stuff, is committed to creating this workforce that's confident in understanding, protecting, and sustaining the mental health of their colleagues, friends, and families, which I think is really key, too, is that not only when we go out in the world, but we go back to our family and our friends, too. And then how does that spill over? And so there's this growing focus on opening up the dialogue and tackling these negative attitudes that really can prevent people from accessing health, and also just having the ability to raise awareness of the skills needed to manage personal emotional health and support those in need are integral to this new approach. So I thought that was really exciting, because they've created this whole program. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's definitely an intersection between work and family life or work and life. So some people call it work-life balance. Some people may call it work-life harmony. But you definitely have an intersection of work and life and family. And so I think, many of us spend more time at work probably than we do at home.
Yeah.
Or when we get home, we're still working. So I think you've got to think about the whole self and how do we help individuals from a whole self mentality that allows individuals that we're concerned with not just the employee, but the employee at home and the employee family. Because the heft, the harmony that you bring to an employee will spill over both into the workplace and certainly will spill over into the home. And so as much as we can help and be there for employees, making employees feel included, making them feel respected, and making them feel that they belong, will impact how that employee performs, but also will impact how that employee feels. And you really want that employee to feel great, both at work and at home.
For sure. I know we need to support each other. I actually just had 75 of our leaders in Santa Barbara, like our superintendent of schools, our mayor, fire chiefs. I had them just as an action toward mental health on a big piece of butcher paper with my 13-year-old's markers. I just had everybody just commit to, one, raising awareness about their own mental health, whatever it is, just checking in with themselves more. And two, committing to whether they go back to the fire station, the liquor store, wherever it is they work, to bring that taste a little more into their work environment. And just think, maybe I'll ask that person how they're doing, or maybe I'll say hello, in a small way. And I think if we start small by paying attention to the language we use in everyday conversations, it can have a really big impact on, person's perceptions. And also, I think sharing our own mental health experiences for some people can encourage an open and supportive atmosphere. Although I think taking the first step can be really scary for people because it's powerful as far as having an impact, but it's also a powerful step. But I'm just excited because it's great to see these organizations investing in and promoting good mental health, and also supporting those who are going through mental health, situations. Did you know that, I don't know if you probably do know this, but most people's knowledge about mental illness or mental health comes from the media. And studies indicate that mass media is one of the public's primary sources of information about mental health disorders like depression or bipolar or schizophrenia. Sandra, I was wondering, what has your work in the diversity and inclusion field, in the media field, taught you about the attitudes that are held toward mental health as you interface with people?
Yeah, that's a great question. I still think from where the lens and life in which I live and kind of operate on, I still think there's a lot of work to be done in the media around mental health issues, around wellness. I still don't think, maybe just one little tip, but I still don't think it's something we see or hear on a regular basis. I think oftentimes, and there's some television shows that are starting to do a better job, but I still think there's still room to grow and a lot of work to be done. So I think in the diversity space, it's one thing to have diversity, but the next question is, how are things being included? How is mental health being included in the storytelling, in the daily lives of the kinds of images and stories that are being told? And so I think there's still a lot of work to be done.
I had this guy he does sound studios for like George Lucas and all these people, and he had a good word he came up with, an anti-stigma. I thought that was a good one. It's kind of like the opposite, because I feel like, if we portrayed in these TV shows a little more of what you're talking about, instead of just portraying almost always the negative piece, also how do we lift somebody up? How do we show them love? How do we show them compassion? In a very genuine way, and making that a little more explicit and definitive, like, when you look in my eyes, I feel so much better. I feel connected. I feel understood. We could be sprinkling that a little bit more. And there's a UC California Berkeley psychology professor that says the worst stereotypes come out of depictions of individuals, especially mentally ill individuals, as being incompetent, dangerous, slovenly, and undeserving, which is not accurate in my experience at all, because I've seen so many thousands of people, and it just covers everybody. Could be anybody. So this is a really, really important topic, because so many people use media, and then they integrate that into their life. Sandra,
I think media touches so many people, and it's it's in front of us on a regular basis. It's constant. So as much as we can integrate the right portrayals, and it's not just the portrayals. We got to hire those people, individuals as well. Sometimes we put actors and actresses in those who are not those actual individuals, and so I think it's also about giving individuals an opportunity who actually walk in this space on a daily basis.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be cool if you even had a TV show almost, because you know what I mean? You could write, if you're a good writer, you could write up a script for a TV show. But also, I think commercials are really big. I mean, I don't actually have TV in my home. I have a big iMac, but I've raised our son without really TV, just because of some of what violence and other things that I've tried to kind of teach him in a different way. But I think commercials are such a big piece. I was excited because I was somewhere and a Michael Phelps commercial came on, and it was like, you should go to therapy. Don't be worried about, that people are going to judge you for your mental health. Take care of yourself. It's great. And I was just happy because it was simple, and it's somebody who people really listen to. And it also allows for this inclusion, this piece of like, you're with us. We're all together here. So, because the Dalai Lama, he says we're all breathing in the same air. I like that too. Don't you think that's a good one?
Well, we definitely are all breathing in the same air. And the question is, how are we taking care of the air?
Exactly. I know. It's so true. Sandra, I appreciate all your sharing too. You do have a lot of good perspectives. I was wondering, how do you feel a person understanding diversity and inclusion in the media could help a person going through a mental health crisis?
Well, I think as much as people see themselves and they see the full dimension of themselves, instead of us having one sense of portrayal of a specific group, if you don't show the true spectrum and diversity, I'm an African-American female, not every African-American female. We don't act and walk and look the same. We are dealing with different things in our journey in life. And so we've got to show that full spectrum and not think that one image or one person reflects an entire community.
It's so true.
And so that's where I think that's where Hollywood has got to expand its lens of how it portrays individuals and not come forward that all people or person dealing with mental illness, that all individuals are the same in their journey in that space.
Right.
And so that's where the work still has to take place.
It's kind of like an art tapestry. We're all just so different, even though we might have the same skin color, the same hair, or I don't know. I mean, but we're all just so very different. But, I think there's common denominators. So you're saying by demystifying or clarifying that, just because someone's of a certain culture or race or class of people, that that might not be predictive or indicative of all people of that type. And so it's really important to get educated and clear on the diversity piece. Is that kind of what you're talking about, to be more inclusive?
Absolutely. I mean, part of diversity is not just, some people think it's the broadest sense of diversity is what I'm talking about.
Right.
When I think about diversity, it's diversity in the broadest sense. I mean, we've got everything from our identity. We've got everything from our social economic standpoint. There's so much to diversity, but we tend to maybe look at it in a very small way.
That's so
We've
true.
got to open it up.
Well, I think...
And I don't think...
Go ahead, sorry.
I don't think from a diversity standpoint you can just focus on diversity. You've got to look at how inclusive are we in that discussion, and how are we making sure every person feels a sense of belonging and a sense of being included.
For sure. I know that's going to be a big ongoing journey. Like you said, it's a lifelong project. I think, Stigma really embraces both prejudicial attitudes and discriminating behavior towards individuals. And, I think the social effects of that include exclusion, poor social support, a poor subjective quality of life, and lower self-esteem. So they're really, it's a big impact on the person's quality of daily life if we don't, address these pieces and create these conversations. If you're just jumping on the show now, I'm here with my very special guest, Sandra and Evers Manley, and we're talking about diversity inclusion in the media. And Sandra has an amazing background. So She's a fervent philanthropist. She also has a lifelong history with her own family about living her life purposely with open eyes and an open heart. And she's actually been honored by USC as a small group of 2019 Alumni Award honorees. That included Apollo astronaut Neil Armstrong and opera great Marilyn Horne and some Academy Award-winning filmmakers. And she's a first-time author of her book, Raised Up by Ms. Manley and Her Elves. So you could check that out online. Just if you're jumping in, just wanted to let you know. But we're here talking about the ways mental health and well-being intersect with diversity and inclusion in the media, which is such an important topic. Sandra, I was wondering, have you heard of any campaigns or organizations with a focus on diversity and inclusion in the media that work specifically toward reducing mental health stigma?
I'm sure there's a host of different organizations out there. There's different pathways to wellness. I know there's several organizations that are out there trying to help Hollywood look at diversity and inclusion. There's small groups, there's large groups. I know within the various studios and television networks, they've got diversity and inclusion organizations. I know there's a wonderful organization called Disability In. That is an incredible national organization. There's National Organization of Disability. There's a host of different groups that are out there helping organizations that are, there's Diversity Inc. that looks at corporations and some of the work that they're doing. But there's a number of media organizations out there that's working within Hollywood and out, trying to help bring about more awareness around wellness, around different things like that.
Nice. So there is a big movement, it sounds like, of different campaigns and organizations. I always just like to ask that because I think, in the specific topic we're talking about, and media is such a powerful way to reach people. So it sounds like that's already in motion. So that's good.
Yeah, and I know the ad council, they've done some wonderful work and different things like that. And so I know within both inside Hollywood and outside,
Nice.
There's a lot of different things that are going on to try to help demystify, things around mental health and around wellness. I know there's a lot of tools that people can find online. And there's a lot of activists out there in that space.
There are. Well, I think people are realizing that's kind of like the pinnacle of health, is we really have to address these pieces because, we've reached a point in our world, too, where we're just at this crossroads. But I did my thesis on Gandhi's notion of satyagraha in college. That's the search for truth. And I did it actually on solving child abuse nonviolently in our community. And I love what Gandhi said, which is that out of turbulence comes peace. And I feel like our world's in this very turbulent time, which is very scary for a lot of people. But out of that, we have these, like you and I are getting to have these conversations and other people in our communities and our world. And I'm hoping that will really ripple out, and be a shift. So I feel like we're in this new territory now, but it will just take some time. But I'm always imagining like a world where each person has the opportunity towards self-peace and through the ability to overcome these mental health barriers and obstacles to reach treatment. I do think we need more programs still to be developed to identify and manage mental health and increase awareness and communication are the key ways to move toward this acceptance and health. I was wondering, Sandra, how do you think diversity and inclusion in the media intersects within our community, and why is it important for us to talk? Oh, wait, I think I just asked you that one. Sorry. How can we put more... Sorry, I am going round and round here. Sandra, how can we put more diversity and inclusion in the media information we receive into our lives that would help us create more mental health?
I think, first of all, we've got to ask the question. When we come home from work and we turn on the nightly news, what is being reflected in front of us? If we're not seeing the kinds of things that we think from a diversity and inclusion standpoint, from a wellness standpoint, we've got to ask those questions by sending in letters, making the phone calls. So we've got to help create the change in which we want to see. And we've got to ask those questions, and we've got to challenge our various media sources. The other thing is you talked about what can we do more around mental health and wellness? I just left a program here in Baltimore where we're talking about individuals introducing yoga and mindfulness to preschoolers and high schoolers and how that's changing and impacting what's going on in the classroom. So I like to think of those things as small acts. What are those small acts of things that we can see to help bring about change, help to raise awareness? And so I think we've got to be the individuals to help carry those thoughts and those actions so we can bring about the right results.
So basically you're saying we can bring more diversity and inclusion into our lives and help with our own health and well-being by asking more questions, challenging ideas that maybe we have about something, that's new or different. And if we want to be more involved, also making phone calls and kind of making the change we want to see happen by raising awareness. And then I know you brought up...
Absolutely.
And I used to go every Monday. I'd spend all Monday going and doing mindfulness meditation in schools. I fell into mindfulness meditation, very thankful for that at the beginning of my my clinical postdoctoral internship and fellowship. And I got trained by a lot of these world leaders who now, mindfulness is a hot topic. But I do think mindfulness is very powerful because I think it causes us to slow down, counteract stress, tune into ourselves, be able to take care of ourselves, and therefore be able to take care of others as well. And I think that it teaches us this, they call it in mindfulness shamatha, which is like loving kindness for ourselves and others. And I think we've lost that in a way. We've become so disconnected from ourselves because, the technology and the pace of life. I mean, I grew up in the 70s, so I think slowing down is really key to our well-being too. Just the pace of how we live our life is really important. But
I had a conference last week in Virginia. It was an inclusion conference, and 4 times throughout the conference, I had a trained expert, because again, I'm not a trained expert, to come in and take the conference attendees through some mindful kinds of things, exercises that they can do throughout the day.
Yeah.
To help, and I think it's those little things that will have huge rewards.
For sure.
And so I think that's how we've got to look at things around mental illness and wellness, is what are those things we can do collectively as well as individually to help bring about the change of bringing more awareness and, ultimately the kinds of results we want to see.
For sure. I mean, where I did my PhD, I have an emphasis. I have a clinical psychology degree, but I also have a depth psychology, which is like art, music, myth, poetry, dance, movement. I probably already said dance. But it integrates, a lot of other ways that we need to relate to each other. And I think you brought up the idea of, just slowing down and just kind of having this mindful pause. And I think that we don't all kind of decompress and relate to ourselves and others in the same way. So it's important also for us to check in and learn, what fills us up. Do we need to talk to someone? Do we need quiet time? Do we need, to get involved in a campaign? And I like mindfulness because it's free. You can do it anywhere. And, the idea is to kind of sprinkle your day even for 10 seconds. So it doesn't have to be really complicated too, just to kind of put your feet on the ground or notice the chair that's holding you up and then take in, a breath even is very powerful. So if we could teach our babies and our children and our parents that, I think that would be really, really a big step. And I do think that mental health stigma really creates this wall that stops the compassionate conversations. So having these compassionate conversations builds inclusiveness. And it also teaches others what you've learned, like you and I are learning from each other. Even though you have a specialty in another area and I have a specialty in another area, we can collaborate and learn as well. But I think we can do this by starting to treat each other as equal and reducing discrimination and creating conversations and a culture that are accepting of each person as we work toward prevention. Sandra, we have just a couple more minutes left on the show. I was wondering, do you have any final words of wisdom for our listeners that they could take away from the show?
Yeah, I think, one of the things that, we were talking a lot of this has to do with respect. how do we respect each other? But in my book, Raised Up by Miss Manley in her letter L, one of the words is laughter. And I just think one of the best kinds of healings and things that we can do is bring about laughter, and bring about the joy. And laughter means for me things that you talked about poetry, but the arts. So many of our young people, we've taken the arts out of so many of our schools. They're missing out on those kinds of things that bring about laughter to the soul. So it's more than just about laughing, but it's about those things that make us smile, those things that we can look at and go, wow, isn't that beautiful? And I think that's what we've got to think about. We've got to think about what are those things that we can help bring about some of that laughing and laughter. You know, so many of our young people today live in communities where there's so much violence, or if you go to some of the schools I go to, the schools are broken down and you don't see the beauty on the walls. But how can we help bring about some of those kinds of things? And then lastly, how do we respect each other for what we all bring to the table, especially those who are bringing about good? And that's one of the things I've been telling young people. We see so much in social media today. What are those good things that we can take away and share with others? And clearly to me, that will impact mental health, that will impact wellness. But what are the goods? You know, saying hello to someone, or making sure if I'm in a meeting that everyone had an opportunity, if they didn't speak up, to say, hey, what about you, Deborah? We didn't hear from you. But making everyone feel included and that they belong.
I do that, actually. I have meetings I'm in sometimes, and I can tell one person is like, has a good idea, and for some reason they're being blown off or just ignored. And I notice that people don't do that for me, really, but hopefully someday they will. But I do that for other people, because I think, it's a respectful thing for me, because I care about other people. And I love what you brought up too about in the schools, that you're going to schools and you're seeing kids, who have kind of a downtrodden, not a very uplifting environment, with art, and the walls aren't painted pretty, and you know what I mean? That does fill us up. It fills our soul up. And we have lost our laughter. It's such a big point you're making. I think that's why babies, I studied babies, and I love working with babies. Babies are kind of a big key to all of that, and we don't really appreciate them as much as I think we should, because they're very innately, full of laughter and lightness. And they don't know how to conceal that, because that's who they are, But we kind of suppress that within them. So we probably it's why I'm writing a parenting book. I feel like we need to educate our parents too. No, I'm not blaming parents. I just think the way we parent, about appreciating that and keeping that enduring trait going of laughter, and creativity is so important. And I know you said laughter to the soul. It's true. I think when we smile, we release so many good chemicals too. And then, it
Absolutely
takes all the stress off of our face. In fact, in mindfulness, we try to envision our face like that of a sleeping baby. Because, babies really don't have very much tension in their face, but we all carry so much tension. So those are great ideas. So laughter, healing, joy, and also you're talking about infusing more arts into our lives. And those are great ideas.
More lifting of others, learning from others, listening, and how we listen, give people the attention that they deserve. I think we've also got to be careful with our words. How do we talk to people? What do we say to individuals? And we've got to be careful with our actions. How is that impacting someone? We've got to just be mindful of those kinds of things. I think we've got to be present. I mean, that's probably one of the things I would say, is that one of the things that I learned from my mom as she raised, her 6 kids and 10 foster children, she was always present.
Wow,
and
that's amazing.
She got to see the best of everybody, and she got to understand what was going on with each other. She took the time out and was very present in understanding what was going on in everyone's journey.
Well, and you can see how that really impacted you, because you're very present too, and then it trickles out that way. True. I think that is an art form, but also I think it's something people have almost been encouraged to not be present because there's so many distractions. But I absolutely agree with you, is to really just kind of to arrive and be present and not be fragmented or distracted is a skill. but it can pay off in that we have these improved relationships and we feel better and uplifted, like you're saying. We feel loved and cared for. So it can be very powerful.
And I think for teachers, I can still remember my fifth grade teacher, Mrs. King. She was present. She got to understand, during my generation, we were bused from our school to another school. And she got to see the hurt and the feeling and the loneliness that we had. And she was a part of the solution to make sure we felt included at our new school.
Wow, that was a nice
teacher.
She
did that in a very unique way, but she did it where she was very present. She was respectful of how I was feeling and other students who now came into a school and an environment that was totally unknown to us. It was like a whole different world.
Scary.
So I think that's one of the things we've got to understand is what is that environment, what is the tone we're setting, understanding I like to talk of it as the tone at the top, sort of understanding the mood at the middle and the buzz at the bottom.
That's
we've
cute.
got to be willing to do that.
Yeah.
And that's what kind of being present to me means.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, I think it's hard for us to be present, but I mean, the more we practice that, just kind of sprinkling it throughout our day, that can really have a big, profound effect. I think, we can work together to help create a supportive environment that can really empower and care for the individual. And some ways we can work together are volunteering, checking in with ourselves, learning about other cultures, getting accurate information from accurate, reliable sources, not random scientific studies. And I think that this leads to understanding, including, and caring. And I'm always trying to imagine a world where we can share our feelings and thoughts more freely, and also where we can move toward health of all types for all human beings. And I know there's a lot of work to be done, but if we each do our part toward ending negative perceptions about mental health and raise awareness, I think we can live in a more loving, safe, and accepting world. And I want to thank my very special guest, Sandra Evers Manley, for coming on the Dr. Deborah Show today and sharing her wealth of wisdom. So thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor.
Oh, thank you. And make sure if you're interested to check out Sandra's book. It's actually, I have it myself. It's really, it's good for all ages. It's not just for kids. And if you have any questions, you can write to me on my Facebook page. It's called The Dr. Deborah Show. Or you could write Sandra and I could pass that along to her. And if you or someone you know needs help in Santa Barbara, we have a 24 hours a day, 7 days a week hotline. That number is 1-888-868-1649. And this has been pre-recorded.